Hello folks, this is Rodrigo Werle, Extension Weed Scientist with the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I'm excited to be here today to share the latest research that our lab has conducted evaluating the influence of pre-emergence herbicides on soybean development. During my presentation, I'm going to discuss the benefits and some of the concerns that growers have in regards to the adoption of pre-emergence herbicides in soybean production systems. I'll be focusing on the results of three major research projects that our lab has conducted over the past few years. The first one, investigating the influence of Sofanterzone and Metrobusiness applied pre-emergence on soybean development and yield. The second, investigating the influence of 11 pre-emergence herbicides on soybean development, root nodulation, and symbiotic nitrogen fixation. The third and last project focused on the influence of agronomic practices on soybean canopy closure. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge our sponsors, including the Take Action Herbicide Resistance Management and the United Soybean Board. I would also like to acknowledge the amazing staff and students in our program for the excellent work that they do. Because of their great work, I get to be here today and share these results with you. Water hemp and Palmer amaranth have become the most troublesome weed species in soybean production across the United States. In order to successfully manage this species, growers must prevent them from establishing through the use of sound integrated weed management practices, including the adoption of pre-emergence herbicide programs. Growers must also prevent pigweed plants from growing to seed. One pigweed plant at the end of the season is already one too many. Pre-emergence herbicides represent the foundation of weed control in soybean cropping systems, and there are several benefits associated to the selection and adoption of an effective pre-emergence herbicide, including the fact that they are not dependent on the herbicide tolerance trait of choice. They protect the soybean crop from early season yield loss due to weed competition. They buy the grower time for a timely post-emergence application, and they reduce the weed density that needs to be controlled with the post-emergence herbicide program, therefore reducing the selection pressure on our post-emergence herbicides. One of the major concerns associated to the adoption of pre-emergence herbicide is the potential for crop injury. Soybean crop injury due to pre-emergence herbicides is more likely to occur under cool and wet soil conditions, in lighter soils with low organic matter, when high herbicide rates are used, when the application time is improper, when there is herbicide splashing onto emerging soybean seedlings, and or when soybeans are shallow planted. Other grower concerns include the cost for the herbicide and the application, and also application time. Early in the season, our growers are typically focused on planting their crop, but one advice that we have for them is to make sure that the planter doesn't get too far ahead of the sprayer, so the pre-emergence herbicides can be timely sprayed. Once the pre-emergence herbicide is selected, it's important that the grower has full knowledge of the soil properties at which these products will be sprayed. The rates at which these products can be sprayed are highly dependent on the organic matter, soil texture, and pH. Full knowledge of the soil properties will allow the grower to pick an effective rate for weed control and also pick the right rate to minimize potential for crop injury. With that, I would like to discuss the results of the first project that we have for today's presentation, which investigated the influence of Sofanterzone and Metrobusiness applied pre-emergence on soybean development and yield. This research was conducted in west central Nebraska, and it was led by the research assistants Nikola Arsinovich and Mateus Diavalar. Results were recently published in Weed Technology Journal and can also be found in our Whisk Weeds blog as an extension bulletin. And if you scan this QR code in the bottom right corner of the slide, that'll take you to the PDF of this extension bulletin. So the objective of this experiment was to evaluate the impact of soil-applied Sofanterzone and Metrobusin on early season growth and development of soybean using multiple varieties adapted to southwest Nebraska. Metrobusin and Sofanterzone were selected because under certain environmental conditions, these herbicides are known to cause early season crop injury. For this study, we selected 22 random soybean varieties. Studies were conducted at Brew and North Platte, Nebraska in 2016 and also 2017. The response variables I'm going to be presenting today include soybean crop canopy development at the V2 growth stage, and that was assessed with the Canopio app. So you take photos and you use the app to estimate green ground coverage, as you can see in this photo right here. We also estimated crop stand at the end of the season and grain yield. For our results, the first, I want to draw your attention to canopy cover at the V2 growth stage at about 30 days after planting. Sofanterzone was the only treatment that impacted canopy development. At the end of the season, Sofanterzone also led to a reduced plant stand. We observed 10% fewer soybean plants as compared to the other two treatments, Metrobusin and the control. However, when we harvested the plots for yield, despite having an impact early season and also on the final crop stand, we observed no yield reduction. As a matter of fact, the Sofanterzone and Metrobusin yields were slightly higher than the untreated check. So as our conclusions from this study, Sofanterzone reduced soybean green canopy vegetation at the V2 growth stage and final plant stand at crop physiological maturity, but did not result in reduced grain yield. Therefore, according to our studies here, the control benefits provided by pre-emerge herbicides, they likely outweigh concerns regarding early season injury, assuming that the herbicides are applied following the label recommendations and the soybean crop is established according to local pest management practices. Additionally, growers can opt for varieties with higher tolerance to pre-herbicides when such information is provided by the seed companies. Now I want to switch gears and talk about a greenhouse project that was led by Victor Ribeiro in our program. For this project, we investigated the influence of 11 pre-emergent herbicides on soybean development, root nodulation, and symbiotic nitrogen fixation. Given our objectives, this study had to be conducted under controlled greenhouse environment. So Victor collected soil from an organic field at Arlington Ag Research Station with no history of pre-emergence herbicide use. For this experiment, he used 10-liter pots filled with the soil that I just described. The experiment evaluated 11 pre-emergence herbicides plus a non-treated control. Herbicide treatments included a non-treated control, 3 Group 2 herbicides, imidazapyr, chlorimuron ethyl, and chlorantzolam methyl, a Group 5 herbicide, Metrobusin, 3 PPO herbicides or Group 14 herbicides, Sofanterzone, flumioxazine, and cyclophenacil, and finally 4 Group 15 herbicides, acetochlor, asmatolachlor, dimethenamide, and pyroxasulfone. Prior to establishment of this study, our soybean seeds were inoculated with Rhizobium bacteria. Herbicide applications took place 1 day after planting the soybean seeds into our pots. We planted 6 seeds per pot, and pots were thinned to 4 plants 7 days after emergence, so we had a uniform stand across our treatments. Jumping into the results, one of the first response variables that Victor evaluated in the study was soybean canopy, or percent green coverage, at the VC stage 10 days after treatment, and the V2, or 20 days after treatment. We again used the Canopio app for estimation of canopy coverage. And here a picture showing the original photo, the processed image. For the results, our pre-emergence herbicide treatment impacted canopy development, with Sofanterzone reducing canopy development as compared to the non-treated control at 10 days after treatment. However, When the same data were collected 20 days after treatment, no differences were detected, indicating that Sofanterzone treated plants were able to recover from that early season injury. This project was terminated at 45 days after treatment, when the soybeans reached the R2 growth stage. At that point, we cut the plants at the base, and we estimated soybean biomass. We washed all the roots for root biomass estimation. We collected all root nodules to estimate the number, diameter, and the viability. And viability was assessed by slicing the nodules and evaluating whether they were pink. If they were pink, they were considered active. We also partner up with colleagues in agronomy and soil science to conduct some laboratory assays to investigate whether the pre-emergence herbicide had any impact on symbiotic nitrogen fixation. So for our results, they're separated in the biomass, root, shoot, and nodule, plants of nodule per plant and diameter, and also the nitrogen fixation results. So long story short, our herbicide treatments did not impact any of these response variables. In other words, at 45 days after planting, there was no impact from the pre-herbicides on the biomass of our soybean plants and also the nodule biomass in the root. We did not observe a reduction in nodules per plant nor in nodule diameter. All the nodules that we evaluated were all active. They all had the pink color. And then for our lab results, what we learned is that our herbicide treatments did not impact symbiotic nitrogen fixation, which is great news for producers. So according to this project, although pre-emerge herbicides may slightly affect early season soybean development, the impacts on plant growth, root nodulation, and symbiotic nitrogen fixation were negligible in this project. Therefore, when sprayed according to the label, the benefits, again, of pre-emergence herbicide for weed control likely outweigh any potential concerns regarding soybean development, root nodulation, and nitrogen fixation. And just reminding that root nodulation and symbiotic nitrogen fixation are extremely important for soybean production. So last, I want to switch gears and talk about integrated water hemp management. So this soybeans here were both planted on May 22nd, 2020 at Arlington Ag Research Station using the same seeding rate. The difference between the crop on the left versus the crop on the right is the row spacing. So here we have 30-inch row spacing, 15-inch row spacing. This picture is taken looking from above, and this picture was taken from the soil level. And here's a question that I pose to you. If you were a water hemp plant germinating at this time of the year, where would you rather be? Here or here? In order to address that question, graduate student in my program, Nick Larsinovich, established this project where every week throughout the growing season he transplants small water hemp seedlings and tracks their growth. For his study, he had 4 cropping systems. He had fallow, 15-inch soybeans, 30-inch soybeans, and 30-inch corn. Here are pictures from the seedlings that were transplanted on June 14th, and these plants were harvested at the time that they flowered. Here's in the absence of crop competition, so a fallow scenario, this is how much a water hemp plant can grow. This picture here was taken from 15-inch soybean. This is 30-inch soybean and 30-inch corn. So through these pictures here, they convey the importance of rapid canopy closure for suppression of water hemp. With that in mind, we conducted research to investigate the impact of agronomic practices on soybean canopy closure and grain yield. This research was conducted at Arlington Ag Research Station in 2019 and 2020. For the research, we had 4 factors. The first one was planting time. We had 2 planting times. Early planting time, April 25th in 2019 and April 21st in 2020, and our standard planting time for our Wisconsin conditions, May 23rd in 19 and May 22nd in 2020. We evaluated 2 row spacings for soybean establishment, 15-inch row spacing and 30-inch row spacing. we evaluated 2 tillage practices, no-till and conventional tillage. And we compared 2 herbicide programs, a yes pre-emergence herbicide application and no pre-emergence herbicide application. And the pre-emergence herbicide of choice in this study was Fierce MTZ, which contains metribuzin, group 5, pyroxasulfone, group 15, and flumioxazin, group 14. This pre-emergence herbicide was selected because it is known to cause crop injury under adverse environmental weather conditions, such as cool and wet soils, during the time of crop emergence. In 2019, the experiment was established at a silt loam soil, and continuous corn was the previous crop. In 2020, the study was established in a loam soil, and the fields were in a corn-soybean rotation. Both sites were historically under conventional tillage. Throughout the growing season, Nikola tracked development of the soybean canopy through the use of Canopio app. Here we wanted to understand the time for 90% canopy closure, which is about the time when he's taking these pictures here on the left. Plots were also harvested for grain yield. Besides differences in soil properties in previous crops in the 2 years where this research was conducted, 2019 we had a lot more precipitation than in 2020. And it's also important to point out that during the months of May and June, 2020 was warmer than 2019, and that helps justify some of the results we're going to discuss shortly here. Here I present the random forest analysis results that Nikola generated for his project. The figure on the left here ranked the factors that were most important for canopy closure. We observed major differences between our 2 years. Remember, 2019 we had more precipitation and lower temperatures compared to 2020. So in 2020 we observed faster canopy closure as compared to 2019. Planting time was an important factor for the study, whereas early planted soybeans were able to close canopy faster than the later planted soybeans. Row spacing was also an important factor for canopy closure. 15-inch row space soybeans closed canopy faster than the 30-inch soybeans. Tillage also had an impact, whereas under conventional tillage, the soybeans were able to close canopy faster than under no-till in this study. And last, the pre-herbicide treatment, which also had an impact on canopy closure. For some of our treatments where a pre-emergence herbicide was sprayed, we did observe delayed canopy closure. However, the impact of pre-herbicides in canopy closure was not as relevant as planting time and row spacing. In regards to grain yield, we observed big differences between the years. 2019 we observed higher yield, and that's probably due to more rainfall during flowering. In 2020, a dry spell during soybean flowering, justifying some of these results. Early planted soybeans yielded more than the late planted soybeans. Our tillage practice also influenced the results. In our case here, the tillage treatments yielded slightly higher than the no-till treatments. Pre-herbicides and row spacing had no impact on soybean yield in this study. So the important point here is that even though pre-herbicides impacted canopy development, there was no impact of pre-herbicides on soybean grain yield. So conclusions for the study here: the earlier planted the soybeans, the faster the canopy closure and the higher the grain yield. Narrow space soybeans provided faster canopy closure. However, in Nikola's study, we did not observe a grain yield. Some other studies have shown yield increase when soybeans were planted in 15 versus 30-inch row spacing. The pre-emergence herbicide treatment slowed canopy closure. However, it caused no impact on grain yield. In this study, conventional tillage led to faster canopy closure and higher grain yield. Another integrated weed management strategy that could help growers with pigweed management include cover crops. A treatment that has shown promising results across the United States has been the inclusion of high biomass cover crop combined with effective pre-emergence herbicide programs. And I just want to point out that we're currently investigating the impact of planting green on soybean weed management across 12 sites, and this research is being funded by the United Soybean Board, so stay tuned for those results. Lastly, As I indicated, one pigweed left at the end of the season is one too many. If pigweeds are left at the end of the season, combines go through and do a tremendous job spreading weed seeds. So I would like to urge our producers, if they have scenarios with low infestation, to assure that those plants are removed and not let to go to seed. It's also important that growers take the time during crop harvest to clean the combines as often as possible as a strategy to minimize the spread of weed seeds from field to field. With that, I would like to thank your attention for watching this webinar. I leave here my contact information in case you have questions. I would also like to take a moment to thank Drs. Mark Laux at Ohio State University and Bill Johnson at Purdue University, the Take Action Herbicide Resistance Management Program, and the United Soybean Board for organizing this webinar series. Thank you.